Take your copy of God's Word, if you would, this morning, and turn once again to the book of Exodus, Exodus chapter 15. Every Sunday before our three services, the pastors gather and pray for the day, and one of the things that we prayed today is that God would manifest in this room what we talked about last Sunday. So last Sunday, we talked about why it's important to give the Lord our joyful songs of praise. We talked about why it's good and right to give the Lord our shouts of praise. We want to bring him our loud singing and shouts. But I preached that and you didn't have a ton of time to practice that, so we were hoping you would practice it this morning. So in light of that, I'm going to ask you this question. Are you ready to hear the Word of God this morning? There we go. Very good. First row especially. Thank you very much. You know, I told you last week that I was a little worried about preaching Exodus during Christmas. I mean, this is kind of a sentimental time of the year. It's certainly a time we want to focus our mind on Christ, and really is a special and unique time for us to kind of all as a church gather and as Hebrews 12 says, fix our eyes on Jesus. So I was a little worried of what would happen, but last week was incredible. By the providence of God, we came to Exodus 15, which was this exuberant song of joyful praise. It felt very much like the song that Mary sang. It felt very much like the song that Simeon sang when he met the Lord, very much like the song that Zechariah sang, and very much like the words of the angels and the shepherds. It just felt like a perfect sermon for Christmas right there in Exodus 15. And so I came to this morning and thought, well, how could the Lord ever match that? I mean, is there any other way that we could find something in Exodus that would feel appropriate for Christmas? Well, this morning's text is on a bunch of people who are grumbling because their expectations were not met. That feels like Christmas to me. I think that's perfect for Christmas. I think last week was perfect for Christmas, and this morning is perfect for Christmas. I think the Lord will certainly say something to us about Christmas. You know, I was thinking recently that I assumed by this stage in my life, having been a parent for over 21 years, having 5 children, that by this time I would have written a book on parenting. I thought about it throughout the years and have never done it. Not only have I not written a book on parenting, I haven't written a booklet or a pamphlet or even a little gospel tract, nothing on parenting. As a matter of fact, about 3 years ago, Scott Moody asked me if I would teach a parenting class on Wednesday night, and I said yes. This is a true story. And about 2 months before the class, I wimped out and told him I'm not doing it, someone else has to do it. I just didn't feel ready for that. But the reality is I have learned a few things here and there, and I keep a document on my computer which is just called Principles of Parenting. There's just little things I've learned here and there. It's not enough for a pamphlet yet, but there's just some little lessons that I've learned along the way about parenting. And from time to time, when I have the opportunity, I share those with parents. One of my favorites is this. I shared this with someone this week. It is called the principle of the roller coaster. Now, what it is recognizing that every kid is riding a roller coaster. Emotionally, they're always riding a roller coaster throughout their life, and they don't mean to, and they don't really know they're doing it, and most of the time they can't help it. It's just a part of figuring out life, and it happens very young. If you have a toddler like 3 months old, just almost a newborn, and all of a sudden they look at you one day and they smile, and you're over the moon because they smiled, even though it was probably just gas, but either way, it was a little smile, and you thought this is incredible, and you can't believe that they finally smiled at you, and you're so excited. And then all of a sudden, that smile turns into this blank stare, and it's quick. And the eyes get wide, and they just look at you. And what they're thinking is this: I'm hungry, and no one cares about me. And then they go, ah, and they start to scream. And you think, how did we get from the smile all the way to the blank stare to the scream in a second? And you assume that kind of response will end in a little while, and it doesn't. It happens when they're 5 and 10 and 15 and, on and on. That just still happens. So kids are riding a roller coaster all the time. Here's the principle. You ready? The principle is this: your children are riding a roller coaster, and you can't get on it. That's the principle. So the goal is that as they are doing these up and downs that are natural for this life, that you have learned by the grace of God to stay down here, and you're not riding it with them. So your emotional responses are not dictated by the emotions of your child. And so when they get up here, you don't go up with them. And then when they go down here, you don't go down. And so when they escalate, you don't escalate. You learn somehow by the grace of God in order to just kind of stay a steady and a consistent presence. That's a really good principle for parenting. But I've realized that the only reason that principle is necessary at all is because parents tend to ride the roller coaster, not just of their children, but their own. And so if it was the case that as we grow, we learn not to do this anymore, and we mature, and we understand the ups and downs of life, and they don't phase them like they used to. And so even though circumstances go here and here, we're just always down here. If that was the case, we wouldn't need this principle, because I wouldn't have to say, don't get on it. But the truth is, children are not the only ones riding this ride. That we are too, all of us are. That all of us find ourselves, because of big things and little things, whether it be circumstantially or emotionally, we find ourselves just consistently doing this. And so maybe it's really not just a principle for parenting. Maybe it's just a principle for life that should go something like this. Life is a roller coaster, but you don't have to ride it. And you also don't have to make everyone else ride it with you. I was waiting for some amens from spouses, but I get it. They're sitting next to you, and that's weird to amen right there. But isn't that a wonderful thing to think that it's possible to be on this roller coaster, which is just a normal part of life, but not have to ride it? To somehow be steadfast in the middle of it, to be consistent in the midst of all of that, and then not to force or expect everyone else around you to always be where you are emotionally. Well, Exodus 15 through 17 teaches us how to live that way. Exodus 15 through 17 shows us that this is a real and natural part of life and will always be that way. We will always find ourselves riding this roller coaster throughout life. But the reality is God wants us to learn how to be steadfast and not constantly controlled by the emotions or circumstances of all the ups and downs. It's a great picture of life with Jesus. Now, can I remind you what we've been looking at, lest you think that the book of Exodus isn't helpful or practical to you, that everything from Exodus all the way through Joshua is intended to be a picture of life with Jesus. It is a picture of the gospel. And so that story is the story of people who are enslaved to a brutal enemy that hates them and wants to destroy them. But the picture is then that God sends a mediator, someone who would lead them out of slavery, lead them across the sea, which represents death. And ultimately, throughout this journey of learning how to trust and follow Jesus, God's desire is to take them to the promised land. That is the gospel of Jesus Christ. The gospel is that you are enslaved by a brutal enemy that hates you and wants nothing more than to see you destroyed. You are bound by sin and by Satan. But God has sent a mediator, a greater Moses named Jesus Christ, who has come and died and risen again, so that you might come in this life learning to trust and follow him to the other side of death, ultimately taking you to the promised land, which is glorification in his presence forever. And so the reason Exodus is practical for us is because it shows us what that journey looks like. And it shows us that we're not much different from them. And the way in which God leads us was also the way in which he led them. When we think about their ups and downs, it helps us learn how to navigate theirs. And so starting in Exodus 15, verse 22, and then going all the way to Exodus 17, verse 7, these are the earliest days of Israel's journey with the Lord. So they had just been saved. Think about it this way. They're new believers. They had just been delivered. They had just been saved. And God has said, I'm going to take you on a journey to the promised land, so they will be glorified someday. But in this moment, in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, they're learning how to walk with Jesus. They're learning how to trust and follow the Lord. They're learning how to navigate the ups and downs of life. And this journey that they were on was more of a roller coaster than they ever would have imagined. It was absolutely incredible. I mean, let's just take some time this morning to map out their journey. And let's do a topographic map so it shows the elevation changes, not just kind of this flat line, but let's just think about the elevation changes of their life and think about it in terms of riding a roller coaster. So the story begins at Exodus with people being enslaved for 400 years. Now, if we're thinking about that, would we agree that would be down here? Okay, enslaved for 400 years is down here. And so here they are calling out on the Lord, asking them to save them, and yet he doesn't seem to hear their prayers. And so it seems like the longer this goes, the lower that they get. 400 years of slavery. But God had not forgotten them. He heard their prayers. He sent a mediator by the name of Moses. Moses then went to the people and said, the Lord is going to deliver us. And the people believed. And so now all of a sudden, from down here, they start to go up because they're believing in this mediator and they're believing that God's going to save them. Finally, the Lord has heard our prayers. And then Moses went to tell Pharaoh. You remember this? And then Pharaoh said, I'm not going to let you go. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to make your slavery worse down here. And so now all of a sudden, things were worse than they ever were. They had this incredible moment of hope, but things very quickly went down here. But God did deliver them, didn't he? And so God allowed them to leave Egypt. And so they leave Egypt and they start to come up. And not only they leave Egypt, they plundered the Egyptians. So they're not only leaving with all their stuff, they're leaving with all the Egyptian stuff. Like they are leaving with just all of these things that they have taken. And so all of a sudden they're really up here. I mean, they have plundered their oppressors. That feels good, doesn't it? I've never plundered my oppressors, but it seems like it would feel awesome. And so here they are. They're up here. They're super excited. They get out of Egypt. They go to the Red Sea. And then they hear something. They hear the sound of soldiers and feet and chariots and battle cries. They look behind them. Pharaoh's army is coming. They've got a sea on one side, an army on the other. They say to Moses, did you bring us out here just to die? We wish we were back in Egypt. And so where do they go? All the way down here. But then the Lord opens the sea and they cross on dry ground. And so they keep coming up and up. But all of a sudden they look behind him and there's the army. And the army's in the sea and they're coming. But then the Lord closes the sea and the army is completely washed out in the sea. And so now they're up here again. And so Exodus 15 is when they're here. They have just seen the deliverance of the Lord. Now they have ridden the roller coaster. But boy, right now it could not get better. And so we come to this joyful song as we saw last week and look at chapter 15, verse 21. Miriam, this prophetess of God, invited all of the women with tambourines and dancing, and they sang to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider has thrown into the sea. This is up here. They are enjoying this. And I think now they feel like, well, they've been delivered, right? The enemy has been washed into the sea. There is no more enemy. There's no reason for anything ever to go wrong again. And so certainly they understand that things were a little rough along the way, but now they're on the other side of the sea, headed to the promised land. We're going to stay up here. And they do for like a couple of days. And then look at what happens next. Chapter 15, verse 22. Then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. Well, as soon as you hear the word wilderness, you would imagine that we're starting to go back down. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. So this entire generation with moms and dads and small children and babies and parents and grandparents and maybe even great-grandparents are all there. And they go 3 days through the wilderness without any water, and they become as low as they've ever been before. But then they come to a city called Marah, and they see water. And so I just want you to notice how quickly this is happening. Like they're up here, and they go way down here. But Marah's got water, and they drink the water, and the water is bitter. And so they go back down. It says when they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. Therefore, it was named Marah, which means bitter. And so the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" And he cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a log, and he threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. And so super sad, super happy, right? The log goes in. All of a sudden, we've got tons of water to drink, and they are thrilled with the Lord once again. You would say, well, maybe they stay up there. Well, in a sense, they get even higher than this. Look at verse 27. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the water. they have ended up at like this all-inclusive resort. Like they're in a tropical paradise from the wilderness of Shur. And now all of a sudden they've ended up in this place with 12 springs and 70 palm trees. And everyone that's there is encamped and has a water view. You say you made that up. No, it's right there. And they encamped there by the water. So everybody's place has a view of the water. And man, this could not get any better. After coming out of the wilderness, boy, this feels good. This tropical paradise. And man, it just feels good to stay there for a minute and enjoy this. And maybe this is it. Maybe this is the promised land. Maybe we've arrived and this tropical paradise is it. And then Exodus 16. So they set out from Elim, the tropical paradise, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin. The word Sin there just means the area around Mount Sinai, which is between Elim and Sinai on the 15th day of the second month after they departed from the land of Egypt. So a couple of months they've been doing this. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, "Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt." Listen to this. They're saying they wish they would have just died in Egypt. For 400 years they prayed to get out. Now they just wish they would have died. When we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full, for you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger. Now they're hungry. They were thirsty. Now they're hungry. They have nothing to eat. And so from this tropical paradise, everything's great. Very quickly they go down to this place in which they wish they were dead. But the Lord is going to do something. Verse 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven. You want bread? I am going to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day." But it's not just bread. Look at chapter 16, verse 10. And as soon as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God." Oh, you're hungry? How about I give you meat every night? How about every single morning you wake up to new bread? I'm going to give it to you in the morning, and I'm going to give it to you in the evening, and you're not going to save any for the next day or it's going to spoil. I'm going to give you every day exactly what you need. Well, that's up here, right? All of a sudden we have a promise that every single night we're going to get meat and every single morning we're going to get bread. And it says in verse 35 at the end of chapter 16, "And the people of Israel ate the manna for 40 years till they came to a habitable land." And so God took that care of that need. So now certainly they can take a breath. Things are good. They've got food. They've got water. They're in a good place. Look at chapter 17. All the congregation of the people of Israel moved on from the wilderness of Sin, where it was still a wilderness, but they had bread and they had meat, according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim. But there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" Here they are again. It's like the third time they're just wishing they were dead. But the Lord's about to do something. Verse 4, "So Moses cried to the Lord, 'What shall I do with the people? They're ready to stone me.' The Lord said to Moses, 'Pass on before the people, taking with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock of Horeb, and as you shall strike the rock, water shall come out of it, and the people will drink.' And Moses did so in the sight of the elders." And so now they're back up. Why? Because they've got what they wanted. Now they've got water to drink, and it seems like all of a sudden everything is okay. You want to talk about a roller coaster. I mean, in chapter 16, we're just like a couple of months in. Imagine a couple of months in into your walk with the Lord. This is exactly what it was. And it is challenge after challenge. And there's a challenge and there's a miracle. And there's an overwhelming situation and intervention of God. There is God hates me and has forgotten about me, and I wish I was dead in Egypt. To God remembers me and did something supernatural for me. You cannot imagine riding the roller coaster more than they did. And not only is the roller coaster real, but they are certainly riding it. You can tell by their response. Now, asking why is not always the right thing to do. Sometimes we just don't know. There's a lot of things in life with Jesus that are a real mystery. And the reason that's the case is because Isaiah 55:9 says this, "For as the heavens are higher than the earth, So are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Romans 11 says, who can know the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor? And so sometimes instead of asking why, we just trust that the Lord knows, and most things in life we don't get a good answer for. And so asking why is often not the right thing to do, but we can ask the question why here because the Lord tells us. I mean, why this roller coaster? Why was their life so quickly like this and so dramatic highs and dramatic lows? Why was their whole first 3 months just constantly up and down? Well, the Lord tells us, and he tells us twice. Once in chapter 15, verse 25, and once in chapter 16, verse 4. Look at 15:25. There the Lord made for them a statute and a rule, and there he tested them. Look at chapter 16, verse 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. It's very clear why the Lord was doing this. The Lord was testing them. He was intentionally putting them in situations that reveal the depth of their faith or lack of faith. In other words, this was on purpose. Did you notice how every one of these stories starts where the Lord told them to go to the next place? It wasn't their idea. They would have stayed in Elim for the rest of their life with all the palm trees and the springs. Why would they have ever left Elim and gone into another wilderness? Why? Because the Lord was leading them. This is the leadership of the Lord. And the Lord is intentionally leading them in such a way to test them, to expose whether they had faith or not, to put them in overwhelming situations that were bigger than themselves, that were beyond their ability, overwhelming situations. Why? Because he wanted to test them. The question is, how well did they do on the test? Well, not well at all. They completely failed the test. 6 times it says they grumbled to the Lord. I mean, not only was their life a roller coaster, but they were on it, and every up was so high for them, and every low was so low for them. I mean, so low that the moment they didn't have enough water, they immediately wished they were dead or back in slavery to the Egyptians. They prayed 400 years to get out of Egypt, and the moment they didn't have something to eat, they just wished they were dead and back there. So much drama. And these are adult human beings. These are adult human beings. These are men and women. I mean, you might expect this from children, but these are men and women who the moment something starts to go bad, they wish they were dead. They just continually failed to trust. If you were to read the rest of chapter 16, and we won't for time's sake, but one of the things the Lord says is, every day I'm going to give you what to eat. And if you save it till the next day, it's going to spoil. Now, the day before the Sabbath, take a double portion, and that will be okay, but they don't believe him. And so they take tons. They just hoard all of this stuff, and they wake up the next morning, and all of the food they saved is spoiled. And then some of them did not take a double portion the day before the Sabbath, and they go out to look for stuff and go, where is it? Where's the food? And the Lord told them exactly what to do, but they continued to fail the test. They had very little faith, and they were so quick to think that God had forgotten them. But the point that God is teaching them is this. God is leading them in order to test them so that they might learn to trust him. God is leading them in order to test them so that they might learn to trust him. That's exactly what the Lord is doing. I'm going to lead you in all these ups and downs, and every one of them are going to be a test so you would learn how to trust. Now, I'm going to press it a little bit more. I'm going to ask another why question. Why was it necessary to learn to trust him? Because the only reason for all of this in life was so that ultimately they might learn to trust and follow him. Why was that necessary? Well, I think there's an answer for that too. Look at chapter 15, verse 26. There the Lord made for them a statute and a rule, and there he tested them, saying, if you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God and do that which is right in his eyes and give ears to his commandments and keep all his statutes, I'll put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. Now, we don't like conditional promises from God. It doesn't seem right to us. But can I remind you that they're on the other side of salvation? They've already been saved. So this is not a condition of salvation. They were saved by the supernatural, sovereign work of God in their life by no work of their own. For 400 years, they could not get themselves out. They got out in one night because the Lord delivered them. That's a picture of salvation. You can be saved because of the supernatural, sovereign work of God in your life when you call upon the name of the Lord and ask Him to save you. This is not a condition of salvation, but this is about sanctification. This is about the time between when they were saved and when they get into the promised land. This is about the time in which we give our life to Christ in this entire journey until the Lord takes us home. And there are some conditions there. What I mean is this. God is saying to them, if you will obey me, if you will learn to trust and follow me, things will go better for you. Do they still ride the roller coaster? Absolutely. But things go better for them. And that's absolutely true for us. The truth is, I'm not preaching a prosperity gospel, I'm just preaching the gospel that the best of all possible lives in this broken world is a life lived in a right relationship with Jesus Christ. That is the best of all possible lives. And the reality is, even though life is filled with ups and downs and a lot of difficult circumstances, the worst possible thing you can do as a believer is to continue to sin and bring yourself back into more brokenness. Why, having been delivered from sin, would you intentionally walk back into sin and bring more brokenness, which is exactly the reason Jesus saved you to get out of that? The truth is that Jesus is saying to you, if you'll learn to trust me, if you'll learn to follow me, you will experience the fullness of everything I have for you, and life will still be hard, but you will experience my goodness in every area of your life. I will give you the grace and the wisdom that you need, and I will leave you into my life and my life abundantly. What God is saying to them is this, is that my heart is to bless you, and my desire is for you and for your good, and I want things to go well for you. I want you to experience the fullness of everything I have for you. I want you to know my love and to know my kindness and know my grace, but you must learn to trust me. You must learn that my way is better. You must learn to walk in my way. And so it helps complete the picture. Here it is. The Lord is leading them, and the Lord is testing them so that they might learn to have faith. Why? Because the Lord loves them and wants something good for them. He knows that if it was left to them, they would walk the other direction and go back to Egypt. They would go back to their sin when things got difficult. But what the Lord was saying is this: if you would just learn to trust me, if you would just learn to follow me, I promise you I'm leading you into something good. What I have for you is better than anything you had in Egypt. It's better than anything. And there's going to be trials along the way, but trust me, I am leading you and I am testing you so that you might learn to trust me. Because I have something good for you and I want you to experience my love. That's the point of the roller coaster. And so why all the ups and downs? Because the Lord knew this: if they had not had the ups and downs, they would never have been forced to trust him. And if they were never forced to trust him, they wouldn't learn to trust and follow him. And if they didn't learn to trust and follow him, they would have never experienced all the things that he wanted to give them on the way out of Egypt. That's the way the Lord is working in their lives, and that's the way the Lord is working in our life. And the reason this is so helpful to us is not only because it's a picture of life, which it is. Like, we just need a real good picture of life, that this right here never ends. It just never ends. I mean, even moment by moment, we can find ourselves here and then here. And sometimes it's circumstances, sometimes it's just emotions. But the reality is life feels a lot like this. And what God is saying to us from Exodus 15 through 17 is that in all the ups and downs and all the ways he's leading you, he's teaching you to trust him. Why? Because he loves you and he has something good for you. That his pathway is good and right. But what I love most about this text is not that just a reminder of the life in which we live, which is helpful. I think it's helpful for us to know that God does lead us that way, that that's a real part of life. But I think what's most helpful is it teaches us how to, in the midst of the roller coaster, not ride it. Like, we certainly go in all these ups and downs, and our life is like that, but how can we stay steadfast, and how can we have a joyful and peaceful calm in our life? How can we make sure that these ups and downs fulfill their intended purpose in our lives? We don't want to miss what God has for us. Can you imagine having to go through all the ups and downs, but then not growing to have more faith? Not trusting and following the Lord more on the other side of them? This is the way that God has always worked, and he told us this. James chapter 4, verses 2 through 4. Count it all joy, my brother. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know. How do you know? Because of Exodus. That the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Can I tell you the irony of this? What we want is steadfastness, meaning this: we just want to be a consistent, steady presence in every area of our life. But what James says is the only way you learn steadfastness is through these ups and downs. So we will never learn to be steadfast without having to go through all of these ups and downs. The ups and downs are necessary to make us into the person we want to be. Peter says it too, 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes, though it's been tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So what James and Peter teach us is this: our goal is not just to survive the ups and downs, but to rejoice in them. Not just to survive, that's not the goal. The goal is not just to survive. We don't want to just to survive. We want to rejoice in these things. We want to recognize that they are for our good, that we are being led by a God who is testing us so that our faith may grow because he loves us and wants something good for us. The question is, how do we live that way? So if the ups and downs are a reality, and everybody's life is going to have them, and some of you struggle more with this, some of you have lots of ups and downs every day, some of you tend to be more consistent, but all of us have this in some way, how can we live with a more peaceful and joyful confidence? Well, the simple answer is this: do the exact opposite of everything they did. That's the simple answer. Like, do the exact opposite. Don't do the grumbling. Don't do the complaining. Don't do the I wish I was dead. Don't do the I'd rather be still stuck in sin. Don't do the so immediately I love Jesus, I hate Jesus, he loves me, he hates me. I'm in a tropical paradise, I'm in hell. Like, we want to avoid all of that. But I want to, as we close this morning, to give you 4 words to leave with. I'm not going to say much about them. I just want to give you 4 words that will help us to respond in a way that's different, to respond in a way that we will ensure that we rejoice in the midst of these and remain steadfast. The first word is this: stop. Stop. One of the things I just want to yell at this generation of people, and I would say this: it's interesting, we look at them and we think how pitiful they are, but we're just as pitiful. Can we just acknowledge that? Like, how pitiful. They just got saved from Egypt and they want to go back. No, we are all that pitiful at sometimes. But I just want to say to them, could you stop for a moment and get some perspective here? I think if you were just to stop for a moment and take a breath, and just stop and recognize the way you're acting and the way you're responding, and listen to yourself for just a minute. Like, just stop for just a second. Just pause for a moment and let's get a little bit of perspective here. Just stop for a second. Because they didn't. They just kept going. Immediate responses. Just stop. Second, remember. Remember what God has done for you. If you take the time to stop, you can also take the time to remember. Can you remember that the Lord just delivered you from Egypt? Do you remember that for 400 years you were enslaved by an oppressor who hated you? Can you just remember that the reason I got you out is because I want to bring you in? Do you remember that I have a glorious future for you? Just stop and remember what I've said I'm going to do and what I've done in the past. Just stop and remember the goodness of God. Such an important verse here is Romans chapter 8, verse 32. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? If God did not spare his son, he's not going to spare anything else. If he graciously gave you his son, he will graciously give you all things. Don't question the goodness of God. Stop, remember. Third, trust. Like, just take a moment to stop and look back at the faithfulness of God, look ahead at his promises, and just believe for just a moment that the God who has delivered me and the God who has promised to save me is with me today. I can trust him today. And I can trust that the situation isn't bad as I think it is, in the whole scheme of everything that God is doing in my life. I can just trust him. I stop and I allow my heart to trust him for a moment. I stop, I remember, I trust, and finally I just want to say this. And I hesitated to say this because it's so simple, but it's so clear in the text. You stop, Get some perspective. You remember what God has done and how good he's been. You then pray. You pray. I mean, they just constantly grumbled to Moses. Like they never one time talked to the Lord. They never even said, Lord, why are you doing this to me? That's something the Lord will receive. I mean, even passages like Psalm 142:2 says, bring your complaint to the Lord. The Lord would even been okay in a sense if they would have said, Lord, why me? And why is this happening? It's okay to wonder about those things to the Lord. What's not okay is to live with a grumbling spirit, always a moment away from being angry at God and questioning his goodness and just bringing that grumbling to everyone else but God. It's not good for your soul, and everyone else around you hates it. It's just not good for your soul. It's not good for anyone else's soul. No one wants to be around a constantly grumbling person. It crushes the souls of everyone else, but God doesn't want it to be that way. Like he doesn't want the grumbling of your own heart to spill over into everyone else and change the atmosphere of your marriage or your home or your relationships, your friendships. And what he's saying is to stop and to remember what God has done and to trust him and to bring these things to the Lord and allow him to minister to you. And the reason the stopping is so important is because we have to stop to pray. We can't just continue to go from here to here to here to always feel like we're responding emotionally to every situation. No, I'm going to stop for a minute when I start to feel this way, and I'm going to remember the goodness of God. And I'm going to choose to trust you, Lord, because you have never failed me yet. You have never failed me. And I'm going to bring these things to you, and I'm going to say, Lord, help me. Give me the grace to be able to be the person that God has called me to be. Give me the grace to be changed as a result of these ups and downs. You know, here's what I think. I hear the alarm. I know it's time for me to be done, but one more thing. So here's what I love about Exodus 15. Tambourines and dancing and songs of joy. 3 verses later, they want to die and go back to Egypt. You know why I love it? Because that's Josh Smith. But here's, I think, the goal of this morning. That not only can you sing when the Lord is doing everything you want him to do, you can sing when nothing seems to be going right. Why? Because you know him and you trust him and he's proven himself faithful time and time again. Church, you can trust the Lord. Let's bow our heads and close our eyes.